SosKaid fell back on her elbows, pistol dropping from her left arm. Her right lay awkwardly on her lap with a disconcertingly squishy feeling. There was blood pumping freely from her leg, and she began to feel blackness creeping in at the edge of her consciousness. She threw up. She heard footsteps hurry past her to her left, followed by the sound of knees hitting the damp earth nearby. There was a sob. As SosKaid sank back further, the leafless toothpicks of trees took on a strange perspective, pricking at the starry night sky before swirling to black, the sobbing ringing in her ears.
I can see that this love was meant to be only a poor...
Hello and welcome back to A Wasteland Story, the show where our heroine SosKaid and her little friend just keep trying to survive the nasty, dangerous, and sometime hilarious post-apocalyptic world of the Fallout 2D20 RPG. But they just keep finding themselves consistently and unintentionally involved in the growing tension between the Brotherhood of Steel, the New California Republic, nasty raiders, wild ghouls, and a mysterious man who apparently wants to take over the world by employing the definitely reliable help of huge mutated super soldiers gone wrong. What's the worst that could happen? In the last episode of the show, SosKaid was presented a quest to obtain a sample of the super mutant-inducing substance, the FEV, from the grasp of James Bond villainesque, definitely not a real doctor, Dr. Wright. SosKaid and Dogmeat rescued Brotherhood of Steel scribe Hawthorn from the clutches of a nasty raider in a dubious drive-in, and have now tracked a band of raiders on their way to mischievous deeds in the ghoul settlement of Keshar with the help of none other than Hawthorn's own comrade, Ramirez. That's a lot going on right there. We left our survivors at the edge of the raiders' camp with a set trap, and SosKaid taking a sneaky shot at the biggest and nastiest of the raiders in an annoyingly hangy unresolved role. And she's going to take a shot. Will they stop the raiders in their tracks? Will they rescue the rogue Brotherhood member Ramirez and make it to Keshar safely? Do they even want to? These are all questions that might actually be answered right now in this episode of A Wasteland Story, so stay tuned as we finally resolve that role for you. Sorry about that. Woohoo! The lightly crystallizing outbreath of SosKaid's concentration dissipated, and time seemed to slow down. She knew that two of the raiders had begun their patrol on the other side of the clearing, that Hawthorn was ready nearby behind the cover of a tree. She knew that two frag mines lay in wait for the soon-to-be oncoming enemies, and that Dogmeat was by her side, low to the ground and poised for action. But all she saw through her right eye and the simple sights of her hunting rifle was the shadowy face of the huge raider in spiked armor, standing massively with his beefy arms folded across his chest. She saw him spit on the ground, and she pulled the trigger. Woohoo! That is a crit, that is a 1 and an 8. So we generate an action point. Excellent. We may spend it to do some extra damage. We hit him in the right leg. So we're doing 6 dice piercing 1. And he has 2 physical resistance. Okay. So we need to do lots of damage. I think we're going to spend that AP to do an extra dice worth of damage. Dogmeat's sitting there with us as well. Big hit, come on. 1, 2, 3. That is not good enough. Everyone at the campsite ducked as the crack of the rifle disturbed the quiet nighttime air. SosKaid had aimed at the leader's right leg in an attempt to slow him down once he inevitably came for them. She'd been hoping for the chance for a second shot. The huge man's hand dropped to the gap between his armor and his thigh. He lifted his hand to his face and inspected it, frowned, and spat once more on the ground before hefting his evil-looking oversized machete onto his shoulder. He growled. And just before SosKaid takes the shot, Hawthorn is going to do a bird call, which is the scout code for Ramirez. And we'll see what he does after this shot happens. Damn it, said SosKaid quietly as she quickly slid the bolt back on her hunting rifle, flinging the bullet casing into the darkness. From a tree nearby, she heard a strange bird call, apparently coming from Hawthorn. SosKaid saw Ramirez look up as she lined up another shot on the still stationary leader's leg. A little lower this time.
I'm going to use my last luck point to re-roll these 3 blanks. Excellent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That means we get a critical hit in the right leg, piercing 1, so it does 6 damage to his 21.
This time the bullet dropped the man to his knee, and SosKaid could see a dark stain forming on the lower part of his leg. The man roared and ripped the now twisted piece of thin metal around his thigh off its buckle and flung it into the night. He looked up. Everyone else was frozen in place, waiting for an instruction.
So, critical hit to the leg. You immediately fall prone as your leg gives out under your weight. You can no longer take the sprint action, and the move action is a major action. That is good news. So she hits the raider in the knee, in a weak part of his armor, and he screams, swears, and falls to the ground. Can they tell where the shot came from? His perception is 8, and let's say sneak. Let's say survival. So 10. Yes, they can tell.
Over there, you fucking Nancy's, the leader roared. Go, now, or I'll shoot you my damn self.
So they know where the shot came from, and he points and he says, "Get the fuckers!" or whatever it is that he shouts. The others start running, and then we go into initiative. First things first is, of the 3 left, do they all run towards where the shot came from? I think it's unlikely that they all run. No, they don't all run.
The 2 raiders on patrol broke into a run towards the tree line. The third took up cover behind one of the logs that had been dragged over to the fire, resting his pipe pistol in both hands on it. SosKaid heard a shout of, "Come, doggies!" and turned to Hawthorn's position as she flung the rifle over her shoulder and drew her pistol. She nodded to the shadowy figure and began to retreat back and to the side, further into the trees, breathing heavily.
So 2 of them break off and run towards where the shot came from. Are they both side by side? Yes, and something else happens. That's a 33. There's a random event, I think is how that works. Whew. Random event. This could be bad. Could be good. Okay. Let's see what the event focus is. This could be interesting. 43 is NPC negative. Oh, well. I think this probably means that Ramirez is going to get shot.
As SosKaid retreated in a half-backward scuttle, dogmeat unsettled and getting under her feet, she saw the leader stand, pick up his rifle in his offhand, and without looking, discharge it into the chest of the now crouched Ramirez with a "Fuck you, soldier boy."
So I think what happens is the raider veteran shouts to his... and he's got a combat rifle, which is not much good in this short range. So I think he shouts to the one raider that's left behind him, "It's that bastard Brotherhood of Steel. Take him out." And then the other raider also runs.
SosKaid lost sight of the camp as she pushed her back up against a tree, determined to be as far away as possible from the mines and the open ground. She heard another shout, "What the fuck are you doing, pussy? Get in there!" Followed by a nervous, "Yes, boss." More footsteps joined the thumping on the dirt, and she swung her pistol around, leaning on the tree for support just in time to see the first 2 raiders reach the edge of the forest and of their trap.
I think that means there's 2 of them, seeing if they can detect the mine. I think it's going to be difficult for them because they're probably pretty well hidden. They're not expecting there to be mines in the forest, and they're just running towards it. So I think it's a difficulty 2 if they spot the mine. And they would need perception, sneak or survival, doesn't matter. They would need 6. Do they spot the mine? Difficulty 2. Ha! They do. Wow, a 4 and a 5.
"Fuck, look out!" she saw one of the pair shout as he shoved his companion in the shoulder and to the side, slowing as they reached the trees. SosKaid looked down and saw the glint of moonlight on the mine that Hawthorn had placed. Damn it, she thought as the 2 deftly avoided the trap, separated, and reached the tree line unexploded. This wasn't good. SosKaid had been relying on taking 1 or 2 of them out before they got into a real firefight. She brought her pistol back to her chest as she slid around the back of the tree. They still had a small advantage for as long as they weren't seen. She hoped that Hawthorn could keep it together and hold her own, and then realised she'd lost track of where the scribe even was now. She took another deep breath and let it out slowly, trying to focus her ears on the position of the raiders. Were they already moving?
So, unfortunately for SosKaid, as they're running up towards it, one of them has the wherewithal and sees a glint of metal and he says, "Shit, go around." And they go, pincer movement, they split up, they go around the mines, and then back in front. And now we need to ask, do they see one of us? If so, which one? I'm going to ask Mythic that. Do they see one of us? I think now it's likely they don't see any of us yet. So they run around the mines and back together and start looking around, and they're sort of on guard, but that is their whole turn.
SosKaid heard the crack of a stick and heavy breathing somewhere behind her, and a come out, wherever you are." She tensed, but at least they hadn't been spotted. She had to make an assessment to where Hawthorn was most likely to be and give her a signal to surprise the stalking enemies. If they could take these two out quickly, they might be able to reposition and get the jump on the others. She checked the chamber of her pistol. Not many bullets either, she thought. This was going to be tight. Tight or over. The footsteps of the third raider came to a stop. "Where are they? You get 'em?" came a hopeful voice. "Shut up, dickhead," followed the hissed response. SosKaid looked again for any sign of Hawthorn, but there was none. Maybe she'd bolted, thought SosKaid in despair. No, she had to assume the soldier was holding her position. If she could sneak around to their flank and Hawthorn was where she should be, the group's focus would be split and they might just be able to take them out. "Stay there," she whispered to dogmeat, waited 2 heartbeats, and then broke off to her left, ducking low between the trees as quietly as she could.
Okay, they duck behind trees. The other one gets to the edge of the clearing and ducks behind a tree as well. That is their whole turn. We're still hidden. Do we try to sneak around somewhere and take another shot? Maybe that might be the right way to go.
SosKaid watched her feet in the moonlight, trying to avoid stepping on anything that might make a noise. 3 trees. 5. No shouts or shots disturbed the now silent forest. She needed to get a bit further without losing track of where they were. If you have an advantage, do everything you can to keep it, she reminded herself.
Okay, so both SosKaid and Hawthorn try to sneak around to the other side of the clearing to get another shot, like so that they're behind them and the guys aren't in cover anymore. So we're going to do another sneak test. I think Hawthorn stays where she is and SosKaid tries to sneak around. I think it's difficulty 2 now. So we're doing agility sneak, which is 12.
SosKaid slammed her back up against another tree, a little too hard. She couldn't hear anything other than her own breathing. She had to get it under control. She held her breath, but that only succeeded in raising the relative volume of her own heartbeat in her ears. Had she been spotted?
We've got a 4 and a 9, baby. So SosKaid successfully sneaks around to the, let's say, west side of the clearing a little bit more, or around to the east side of the clearing a little bit more. So she's now in close range. She has slung her hunting rifle back on her shoulder. So she pulls out her 10mm and she takes a shot at one of the raiders.
There. A faint moonlit shadow appeared at her feet. SosKaid had to stop herself from panicking. She'd been found. Her hands tensed on her pistol, not knowing what to do next. Don't assume and act too fast, she said to herself. She noticed the shadow sway slightly, but there was no one running towards her. She risked a glance around the tree and saw one of the raiders, his back against his own tree about 10 meters away. He was also peering around his, but in the other direction. Now was her chance. She took aim and tried to get a sense of where the other 2 were. She saw a second shadow, stalking low, and followed it to its source out of the corner of her eye. Okay, 2 accounted for, but no third. That would have to do before she lost her shot.
It is a sneak attack, so we're going to get an extra damage. I think that's what sneak attack does. Sneak attack. I love sneak attacks, have I mentioned? So you reduce the difficulty and it gains vicious. Awesome. Awesome. So that means we don't even have to roll. We get vicious at raider number 1. Shooting him in the head.
At the last second, the raider in her sights straightened up, creating an easy shot at his head, rather than the shoulder she'd been aiming at. SosKaid readjusted and pulled the trigger.
4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 damage in the head. That's gonna hurt.
The bullet must have missed all of the major brain parts, although perhaps that wasn't that hard, because the raider clutched his head and fell to his knees, wobbling slightly but clearly still alive. It was only then SosKaid registered the sound of her own shot and heard swearing and the shuffling of feet nearby.
He has no protection on his head, so he's taking the full 6 damage and a critical hit in the head. All tests which rely on vision by +2. Good. So that was SosKaid's turn. It should have been the veteran's turn first, but that's okay because he's got a broken leg. So he stands up and he throws his big weapon over his shoulder and he starts going in the direction. I think he's smarter than that. Does he go straight for them or does he go into the forest? Does he go into the forest? I think it's likely. Oh, extremely yes. Not only does he go into the forest, but SosKaid out of the corner of her eye just sees him disappear into the clearing. And now they don't know where he is.
No Hawthorn, no dogmeat, no onslaught of angry raiders. It felt to SosKaid like the calm before the storm. As if to confirm this thought, the image of the raider leader's scarred face came into her head and she jerked her gaze toward the clearing that she was now able to see again. He wasn't there. Was that a shadow she saw slipping into the trees at a distance away to her right?
And then we're going to have to roll each turn to see if he gets the jump on us. It's now Raider 1's turn. He's going to turn around and try and shoot SosKaid because she just shot him in the head.
Shit, she thought, and tried to keep another relative position of threat in her head. But she had to focus on the enemies in front of her. Where are you, Hawthorn? She thought, starting to get a little desperate. She needed the raiders' attention to be split between the two of them on opposite sides. That was their advantage, and she knew they had to keep it.
But he's got to roll 4 dice to hit her. So he's got no hope. Or is he going to come at her with melee? I think he's going to come at her with melee. Will he come at her with melee? Likely. No, he won't. So he's going to take a shot.
She had been distracted too long, and she flinched in surprise as a bullet skimmed the tree right next to her head. Following it came a shout. "I found him! Right there!" There was a growl and the sound of footsteps moving quickly towards her position from the left.
He needs to get 8. Difficulty 4. Nope. So, not only does he not hit her, but he rolls a complication, and I think we're going to get a ricochet. Does the ricochet hit someone? No, it doesn't. So the bullet ricochets off and just misses. Does the ricochet hit the mine? It's unlikely, but cool. Exactly, the ricochet hits the mine. So he goes to take a shot at SosKaid, who is behind a tree. It bounces off the tree and hits one of the mines, detonating both of them, I think is pretty safe to say.
All of a sudden, the ground shook as one, then the other of the laid mines detonated. Through an absolute 1,000,000 to 1 chance, which we all know means that something is almost guaranteed to happen, the raider's cheap bullet had bounced off SosKaid's tree straight into the dormant casing of the previously laid mine. The trees stopped shaking and a ringing bloomed in SosKaid's ears. Then, all hell broke loose.
Does it hit the 3 of us? No, so it only hits the 2 of them. Happily. 96. Extreme no, so it only hits the 2 of them. I'm going to say for half damage because they weren't sitting right on top of it. So for the frag mines, that has 6 damage and blast. 6 damage halved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Against the first one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he's dead.
SosKaid woke with a start. She was curled up behind her father's towering tool chest next to the workbench. SosKaid? His voice was far away. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. Something felt wrong. Crawling out from behind the chest, she looked blearily around the room. It was dark, and there was the taste of smoke in the air. SosKaid! She looked around the room, lit only by moonlight and the faint glow of her father's terminal. Something was flashing dramatically on the screen. Dad? She replied. An uncomfortable feeling was creeping up inside her. She looked over to her father's T60 power armor strung up on its frame. They'd been working on replacing the outer plating down its left side the day before. Then she saw the smoke starting to creep under the roller door of the work area. The door to the workshop slammed open and her father came tearing in, half-dressed, his combat shotgun held by the barrel grip in his left hand. SosKaid, he said with a sigh of relief. His eyes were glinting, wet. Must have been the smoke, she thought. He walked swiftly to her and held her by both shoulders, straightening her back as he did. We've been attacked, he said quietly. I have to stay and fight, but you have to run. But, she stuttered. No buts. Go now. Take this backpack. I didn't have time to collect much, but it should get you started. You have to get out of here and head to the shack near the hunting grounds and wait beneath the trap door. If I'm not there in 24 hours, you have to leave. Head north and find some safety. But, she stuttered again, her own eyes growing wet. I love you. You'll be okay. I'll be there. If I'm not, it's because I'm dead. Dad! She stammered. You will be okay. You are strong. Remember everything that I've taught you. There was an explosion outside and a chanting of dogs, dogs, dogs. Now go, he said, pulling the well-maintained chain on the roller door, creating a small gap and pushing her out. I love you, sweet SosKaid, he said. Before she could answer, the door slammed down in front of her face. She stood in shock until the sound of gunfire in the house shook her out of it. She flung the backpack over her shoulder, turned, and ran. SosKaid's reality came flooding back with the ringing in her ears and what looked like a skinny limb thumped onto the ground in front of her. She reeled back in disgust and mild satisfaction and shouted, Hawthorn, where the fuck are you? Attack, now!
I think Hawthorn can act now because the raiders are pretty distracted by the mine that just blew up in their faces. So Hawthorn is going to try and shoot the weaker raider with a target number of... laser pistol, target number of 7. She misses.
As if in response, the forest glowed a flash of red as a couple of laser charges lit the air. SosKaid retreated a little more to see if she could get a handle on where everyone was. There were 2 raiders nearby, probably injured, and she had no idea where the boss was. She couldn't forget about him. At that moment, she saw a head poke out from behind a tree to her left. It locked eyes with her and growled before breaking out and heading off to where the laser fire had come from.
So the raider is standing there between his head's ringing, and then he sees a laser shot come and shoot past his ear. But now he knows where both of us are. In fact, everyone knows where we are now. Then, is he going to shoot? No, he's not. That's a 44. That's another random event. NPC action. I think Ramirez is not dead.
SosKaid took 2 steps to the side to try and get a clear shot at the man's back as he charged towards Hawthorn. She raised her pistol and aimed carefully. A second before she pulled the trigger, there was a roar, and she saw Ramirez come out of nowhere and dive at the raider, tackling him to the ground before flipping him over, the moonlight reflecting off a dark stain on his chest.
I think out of the blue, this guy, the raider, pulls out his tire iron and closes in on Hawthorn. And just as he's about to swing, out of nowhere, Ramirez comes up from behind and tackles the raider to the ground and starts punching him in the head.
The Brotherhood of Steel member raised both his fists into the air and began pummeling the hapless prone raider in the face. Fuck you, son of a bitch! He grunted as he pounded the man's head into the ground with his heavy combat-gloved hands a few times before grabbing a rock nearby and continuing his passionate assault. The raider's leg twitched and then stayed still.
Being very, very protective of Hawthorn. Let's just do unarmed strike, which he hits, and he does 5 physical damage. And it was a sneak attack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he jumps, knocks over this guy who is about to attack Hawthorn and just crushes his head with both his fists as he sits down on it. He's sitting on his back or his chest, and with both his gloved hands, he smashes down and just completely smashes this guy's head in.
SosKaid was still aiming at the raider on the ground as Ramirez rolled off him and collapsed. Shit, she thought. I guess that answers the question of which side he was on. Ramirez lay still, panting. There was a shout from Hawthorn. Caleb! SosKaid saw her approach out from behind one of the nearby trees and run toward her now motionless comrade. Going well, thought SosKaid as she checked her pistol again, but not out of trouble yet.
Deadies. And he probably then rolls over and collapses. So we have one raider left, and we have the boss somewhere in the forest. The third raider, I think he's shooting SosKaid. So he has to hit defense. SosKaid is pretty hard to hit because she has the 2 defense. Is he going to shoot or charge? Will he shoot? I think no, unlikely. 59, no, he's not going to shoot. So he charges SosKaid and attacks her with his tire iron, which he hits. He gets a crit. Ouch.
The second she had this thought, SosKaid felt the movement of air behind her, but too late. Something hard hit her across the flat of her back, knocking the wind immediately out of her. The pain was a white flash in her vision, intensified by the knowledge that she'd waited too long to react to Ramirez's interruption and that it was all her fault. Her face hit the dirt, cheek painfully connecting with her left shoulder as it twisted awkwardly beneath her. She struggled to force her lungs to start working again and tried to roll over to face her attacker.
So he rolled an 11 and a 1, so if it wasn't for the 1, he would have missed. But he is doing 4 physical damage against SosKaid. He hits her in the torso with his tire iron, doing 1, 2, 3 damage in the torso. Happily, SosKaid has 3 damage resistance, but I'm going to make a little mark because I like the idea of the armor getting broken. That was his turn, and now it is the veteran's turn. No one's seen the veteran. From the positioning, it's likely that it's SosKaid he's going to sneak up on. And I think that's what he's done. I think he's managed to get within the same zone. And we're going to test to see if SosKaid sees him. So we're going to need perception survival. So that's a 13. Difficulty 1, because he's a big clunky guy. So that's a 13. Yeah, she does.
SosKaid finally managed to draw a deep breath. As her eyes focused in the moonlight, she saw the skinny raider bent over, hands on knees, panting. There was a movement behind the man, and all of a sudden he was flung to the side, replaced by the hulking figure of the raider leader. "You're gonna fucking regret that," he growled, "but not for fucking long." SosKaid was ready though, and painfully lifted her pistol up in front of her.
It's now SosKaid's turn, and she's now going to turn and shoot at the veteran. 14 to hit. She hits, it's tagged, so she generates an action point, which I'm going to spend immediately to do extra damage. So we're doing 4, plus an extra damage die. We are doing, holy shit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage. He has a defense of 2, I think, being 5 damage in the head. Excellent, she's a good shot.
The bullet hit the raider in the neck, apparently exiting through the back corner of the man's skull, evidenced by a piece of something organic flying off and spinning into the air. He didn't fall. He barely flinched. He only roared. Fear taking over her, SosKaid scrambled backwards along the dirt, pistol still in hand, and struggled to create some distance and get to her feet. 5 damage to the head, leaving me with 6 action points, and it was a crit, which means that he is also dazed. So I think we got this. Then we're going to give it to the other raider, who is still attacking SosKaid. This guy is going to get a free hit with his tire iron, doing 4 physical damage. Ooch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 damage. 6 damage to the left arm. So as she turns around to shoot him, her arm's up, and he smashes on her arm. She managed it and tried to get her pistol up again before the skinny raider got to her. She didn't. She felt a snap in her right forearm as the tire iron came down to meet her rising aim. She let out a small whimper as the pistol fell to the forest floor, and she stumbled further back away from it, wanting to cry for help, but the words sticking in her throat. She looked in vague horror as her right arm dangled loosely to her side. Fuck, was all that was going through her head as she reached around with her left arm grasping for the knife in its sheath. She had a flash of the rogue security bot in the facility, and for the first time since that awful moment, she felt the sick knowledge in her gut that she was going to die. Probably breaking her arm. 6 damage to her left arm. Now she's actually hurt. So she drops her gun, being hit in the arm, and her arm is broken. Ouch! Bad news. SosKaid looked around desperately for something, anything to help her. She saw Hawthorn bent down next to Ramirez on the forest floor nearby. Help me! She wanted it to be a shout, but it came out as a whimper. Hawthorn seemed to have heard, or at least realised the situation, and stood suddenly, teeth gritted, drawing her pistol and firing at the raider who'd just broken SosKaid's arm. Get away from her, you bastard! She shouted through gathering tears. Hawthorn sees this and she's going to take a shot at him with her laser pistol. We shot another bullet. Target number of 7. Big hit. It's doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 damage to him, to his torso. Also critical damage. Bleeding heavily. At the end of each of your turns, you suffer 2 dice physical damage, ignoring all resistances. Nice. SosKaid's head snapped back to the front, following the laser shot as it flew past her head, barely missing. It sunk into the raider's stomach, causing his thin armor to instantly melt away along with some of his skin. Blood started seeping past some of the now exposed organs, and he clutched the wound. Fuck! He managed to get out before he collapsed to his knees. SosKaid looked up in shock from the scene of gore in front of her and saw the huge raider striding forward, machete looking almost comically like an oversized cartoon kitchen knife in the man's massive hands. This was it, she thought, as she was unable to get her knife out of its sheath with her opposite hand. It was over. It's the raider's turn. The boss, the veteran, and he's coming for her. I'm scared. SosKaid scrambled backwards again, trying to get her feet around the right way so she could run and get some breathing room. The leader let out a grim chuckle but didn't slow. He brought the machete down in a large backhanded diagonal sweep. Very scared. He's got a machete. Fuck. So he's coming in with a machete. Difficulty 2. Oh no. SosKaid saw another flash of white as the wretched blade bit into her left leg. For a brief moment she was surprised that there was no pain, just a warm feeling on her calf as the blood started to pump freely. She looked up in horror as the man pulled the blade free and raised it again. She was frozen to the spot. And then the pain hit. He hits her with the machete. 3 piercing, 4 physical damage in the left leg. She's just getting cut down. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the left leg, at least we have physical resistance of 2. So the armor is damaged, but she only takes 2 damage. The skinny raider was madly tying a strip of cloth torn from his shirt around his stomach. As he tied the knot, he cackled madly, raised his tire iron, and bolted towards SosKaid, kicking something on the ground as he did. Something slid towards her, but she barely registered it. She was starting to feel woozy. "Dogmeat? Hawthorn!" she said weakly, but there was no sign of either of them in her steadily narrowing vision. A blackness was creeping in around the edges. "No," she thought, "I will fight. I won't give in to these bastards." She pulled herself up onto her elbows, only now realizing she'd been flat on her back. "I will fight." Is it the raider next? 50-50. Yes, the raider goes next. I think it's likely he turns his attention to Hawthorn now. Does he turn his attention to Hawthorn? No, he doesn't! Holy shit, he's still going at SosKaid. We're in real trouble here. So he's going to try and hit her again. Needs an 8. 2 8s, and he gets it. He hits her again. Just as she made it up to the heel of her palm, the skinny raider swung at her head. She pushed herself back again just in time for the weapon only to connect with her knee. It hurt like hell, but through the padding of her outfit it didn't feel like it was broken, and gave her a second to collect herself and take notice of her surroundings. She had one chance.
SosKaid has never been in this kind of a situation. Happily, he only does 1 damage to her right leg, which does have some defense, so she soaks it up. Man.
Clearly feeling the tables had turned, the skinny raider knelt on SosKaid's chest, painfully shoving his knee to push her broken arm into the ground. Ah! She screamed, hope leaving her again. Then she heard a rushing sound behind her.
Hawthorn is going to shoot that raider. She needs a 7 to hit him. She misses.
A laser shot hissed past the both of them, lighting up its wayward trail in the darkness as it went harmlessly by.
Ha! There's the crit from dogmeat. Excellent, so we'll call that a hit.
Something furry leapt over her prone body. Dogmeat, with his full weight and momentum, latched onto the skinny raider's neck and tore him off her. She used the opportunity to get herself half upright. She noted with a grim satisfaction the gurgling sound of the man's throat being ripped out. Good fucking boy, she thought, and looked up. The boss had taken a few steps back when Dogmeat had leapt, but now he was coming again, and Dogmeat was too far away to help. She heard Hawthorn swear as she struggled to get another cell into her pistol. SosKaid took a hurried breath, and then a flash of realization hit her. She felt something cold touching her now exposed leg amongst the congealing blood.
SosKaid she's standing, but only just. She has a broken left arm. She had a machete to the leg, and this raider veteran is just standing over her, ready to take her head off, basically. He can't see anything but the blood and death of this skinny little girl in front of him, who has basically destroyed his whole party at this stage. It is now SosKaid's turn. She had dropped her gun. She's sort of down on one knee at this point. The raider towering over her with the machete raised above his head, and she uses a minor action to pick up the gun, point it at his goddamn face, and she is going to use 1 action point to buy another dice to make sure she hits him, or we can just use it all for damage.
The raider boss chuckled now, a cold glint in his eye. Looks like you're out of options, he said in a low voice. I'll be taking your pretty head straight to Bath. He likes that kind of thing. With that, the huge raider took a final step forward and raised the machete over his left shoulder with both hands. No! SosKaid heard Hawthorn shout from behind her, but it sounded a long way away. With very nearly the last of her remaining strength, she kicked out at the man's right knee, the darkest part of the circle of blood on his clothing, her target. Fuck! He roared and stumbled, just for a second.
She's going to not buy another dice, so all we need is, please God, 9 plus... We need a 14. Surely we can get a 14, 1 success. That is a crit.
There was a shot. The raider looked in surprise to his cavernous armpit for a second and smiled. Then, without moving, he slowly toppled sideways, machete still raised, the bullet having gone through the side of the man's heart. SosKaid's pistol was held up in front of her, weaving crazily, her remaining good arm barely able to hold it up. She looked at the veteran raider lying next to her, eyes open and a pool of blood forming underneath him. He was still smiling, but he wouldn't move again. She let out the breath that she'd been holding for what seemed like an eternity and slumped back to the ground, unconsciousness finally claiming her.
2 successes, gain an action point. We're going to spend 3 action points to roll an extra die. So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 die, and we're going to take him down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is exactly enough through his armor to kill him. She shoots him just where the left arm joins the torso there, and it rips through the weak part in his armor, and a spurt of blood flies out of there as he looks like he's still going to stand and then just crumples to the ground next to her.
SosKaid came to for just a moment. Her right arm lay awkwardly on her lap with a disconcerting squishy feeling. There was blood pumping freely from her leg, and she began to feel the blackness creeping in again at the edge of her consciousness. She threw up. She heard footsteps hurry past her to her left, followed by the sound of knees hitting the earth nearby. "Caleb?" she heard Hawthorn say with a sob. The leafless toothpicks of trees took on a strange perspective, pricking at the starry sky before fading to black, sobbing ringing in her ears.
They are successful. SosKaid is badly hurt. Hawthorn runs over to Ramirez to check if he's alive. Is Ramirez alive? He's not. As she goes up to him, she rolls him over and she's pushing him. Ramirez, breathe. And she's feeling his pulse and whatnot. He's either dead or about to die. Does he tell her anything? No. Extreme no. He is dead. Cold dead, but he did save her life. She takes his dog tags and the party will pick themselves up, start to scavenge what they can, and probably camp for the night in this campsite. Exciting.
The quiet but persistent sounds of the forest slowly returned to SosKaid, followed by the rapid return of the pain. She gasped, reality hitting like a door as she tried to prop herself up on her elbows, immediately collapsing again from the pain in her arm. She must have been out for a while because there was a cold light beginning to creep between the trees and the soft sounds of a fire nearby. A warm, rough tongue was apparently trying to lick a hole clear through her cheek. Her head spun as a gentle hand lifted her to a seated position, and she looked down. Her left arm was bandaged, splintered, and loosely bound to her body in a surprisingly professional manner. She looked up as Hawthorn came to her front and knelt before her, watching SosKaid with concern. SosKaid raised an eyebrow. Hawthorn nearly smiled. "We had to do a course in basic training," said Hawthorn. "I had hoped I'd never need it." "I'm glad you did," replied SosKaid. "Why doesn't it hurt as much as it should?" Hawthorn indicated to an empty stim pack on the ground next to them. "I found it in your bag," she said. "Marcus was supposed to resupply after we picked up the package, but he—" She stopped, clearing her throat slightly. "It's okay," interrupted SosKaid. "Thanks." She looked down at Dogmeat, who was happily chewing on a small piece of radar, everything right with the world again. "Do you feel strong enough to walk?" said Hawthorn. SosKaid shrugged but allowed herself to be pulled gently to her feet, wobbling slightly. She gingerly tested her injured leg. It hurt, but it was stable. Thankfully, the cut didn't seem to have gone too deep. "Yeah, I think so," she replied. "So, what's the plan now?" said Hawthorn.
On the next session, we're going to continue our journey through to Keshar or to Newark. We do have a mission to get to Newark and sneak in and get a sample of the FEV. I do want to go to Keshar and get prepared for that, so I think we're going to go there first. And until then.
SosKaid spent the best part of the next day recovering in the forest clearing. It felt almost good to stay in one place, by choice, even if it was just for a few hours. The immediate crisis of the raider group invading Keshar had been avoided, although that just brought the reality of the bigger issue closer to the fore. They needed to get that sample, and once they had it, SosKaid needed to find a way to get it back to the NCR and not the Brotherhood. She hadn't told Hawthorn that element of the plan, and she didn't know how she was going to manage, but she'd have to cross that bridge when she came to it. "If we want to have the best chance of securing that sample, we're going to need some help," SosKaid said to Hawthorn as she started collecting her things awkwardly with one hand. She could just about walk, but it would be slow going. "At the very least, we'll need to resupply and regroup." Hawthorn nodded. "And I need a way to get back in touch with the Brotherhood," she said. SosKaid nodded and finally managed to sling her backpack and hunting rifle over her shoulder. "Okay," she said, wincing and gingerly flexing her fingers on her now reset broken arm. "Let's head out, and hopefully we don't run into any more trouble on the way." Hawthorn grimaced. Yeah, that'd be nice, but somehow I don't have high hopes. They looked at each other and laughed, although it wasn't funny. Despite the bleak outlook, there was in fact some hope in the air, a comforting feeling of not being alone. This way, said SosKaid, and they started the slow trudge towards where she hoped Keshar would be. Thank you for joining me on another episode of A Wasteland Story. If you're enjoying this show, it would be wonderful if you could take a moment and give it a rate review, post about it somewhere that makes sense, or tell your dog about it. He'll appreciate the dog meat bits. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email awastelandstorypodcast@gmail.com, find me, PJ Sack, on Reddit or Blue Sky, or put a note in a rusty tin and bury it to be found after the apocalypse. Join us next time on the show when SosKaid, Hawthorn, and Dogmeat finally make it to the peaceful and uncomplicated ghoul settlement of Keshar to regroup, mod some weapons, and live happily ever after. Ha, yeah, right. That's it from me today, but until we brave the wasteland once again alone together, remember kids, Nuka-Cola may quench your thirst temporarily, but radiation is forever. Bye!